So the iPhone XS Max is one of the more interesting iPhones Apple has ever made, and I still think that to this day, I don't know if it's the first iPhone I'd recommend people to buy, but it's still there, it's still supported with software. So let's go and see how this phone holds up in the middle part of 2023. Now the first thing I'd probably recommend telling you is that there are a few things that changed, but the body is not one of them. This iPhone on the outside has a 6.5-inch Super Retina OLED display, and it's a pretty good panel. Much like how I mentioned before, this type of iPhone, if you're getting it today, you're still going to be getting a decent iPhone that has, a decent amount of performance and a decent chipset inside with a decent display. This was a bigger model at the time. Apple kind of went away from big models and they brought it back here, which was cool. Very high resolution display, still have the notch, and it's a really good panel nonetheless. You have a lightning port at the bottom, glass on the back with a dual camera setup, wireless charging, IP certification. You're still getting a very well-built phone. Like, this is still a very expensive feeling phone. And if you pick this thing up and you start messing around with it in your hands, you're still going to feel like you have a $1,000 phone, which is amazing considering that you could probably buy this phone for like a couple $100, maybe like $200 and something nowadays on eBay. So I will still say the body of this phone and the exterior still gets a thumbs up from me for sure. Now on the camera side, like I mentioned, dual camera setup, you're getting a wide and telephoto lens. You can shoot 4K at 60 on the back, you can do 1080p at 60 on the front, and nonetheless, I think this is still a pretty decent camera. Again, not perfect, you're missing a few things, no 4K at 60 on the front, no ultra-wide camera, but I still think it's an okay camera, and if you really wanted to, you could get some decent photos out of this thing. But do keep in mind that if you are planning on getting a phone like this, it's definitely going to start showing its age, mostly in the lack of that ultra-wide camera and that 4K at 60 on the front. But I think a big thing is probably also the graininess of this camera. A lot of the photos and videos can look a little grainy. It's not the end of the world, it's not a big deal, but from what I've seen, it's kind of one of those things I've kind of noticed, and I just kind of remember whenever I'm doing battery comparisons with this phone. So that kind of covers it up there. Now the biggest change is probably software updates. This phone is pretty much done getting, well, it's not done getting software support. It's the lowest iPhone on iOS right now, on iOS 17, which is crazy. It's so insane how a phone like this can go from like being 4th or 5th in place of getting drop support to now being basically the 1st in place of getting dropped. Still don't understand why Apple does the way they do things, but again, I would still say it's an okay iPhone. It's probably still going to get software support for like iOS 18, maybe even iOS 19 if we're lucky. If you take a look at what Apple did with the iPhone 6s, the last S series phone, they basically went through and they supported that iPhone way more than they supported the iPhone 6. And the iPhone 6 sold very well. The iPhone 6s did not sell well. Maybe Apple could do the same thing with the iPhone XS, who knows? But I would say from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. In terms of the performance side of things, the iPhone XS Max has that Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 GB of RAM. Now, I still think this type of iPhone is a very, very good performing iPhone for its age. I think that A12 Bionic was actually pretty decent, and even with 4 GB of RAM, that's still a lot of RAM to have on an iPhone. Like the iPhone 13 still has 4 GB of RAM, so I still think this thing did pretty well. Of course, the iPhone 14's got more, but I think this iPhone from that perspective is actually decent. If you're doing heavy intensive gaming or you're doing like, mild intensive work or whatever, you'll probably be okay. But if you do spec it out very, very high, of course, it's going to start, kind of not throttling, it's going to slow down a little bit, but I still think it's a decent performing iPhone for sure. So to kind of sum it up, I don't know if this would be the first iPhone I would recommend people to buy, but it probably wouldn't be the last one. Actually, probably would be the last one now. I would probably recommend buying an iPhone 11 or 11 Pro Max over this thing, but that's kind of how I see it. It's kind of how it sums it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.